In this video, we are talking about 7 players that you need to either buy, sell, or hold, plus 4 players that you must acquire now for dirt cheap that have league-winning upside. But before we get into it, take a look at this graphic as it shows that only 8% of you who are watching my videos are subscribed to the channel. So if you could please take a second, subscribe to the channel, like the video, I'd really appreciate it. Starting at number 7 with Marvin Harrison Jr., who exploded in his second NFL game where he finished as the wide receiver 1 in fantasy. Everyone was panicking after week 1. In week 2, he kind of proved everyone wrong, but since week 2, he only has one top 20 finish and has seen his receiving yards drop in 3 consecutive games, despite leading the Cardinals wide receivers in target share at 25%. Marvin also doesn't seem on the same page with Kyler at times, which I get it. It's only Harrison's 5th game with Kyler. There's not going to be a great chemistry right away. That's understandable. But what's more concerning is Harrison ranks dead last in average separation rate at 1.9 per next gen stats, along with a 49% catch rate, which is 6th worst. He also ranks outside the top 30 wide receivers in yards per route run, outside the top 40 in yards per target, and outside the top 100 in route win rate. So that's all a little concerning. Will Marvin have better days ahead? Yes, of course. Will he have these big blow-up games? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, he's still a rookie. He's going to be inconsistent. I think this is a great time to sell high on Marvin. He has 4 touchdowns on the year. He had that big performance in week 2 that we talked about. If you can get an elite wide receiver or running back in return, then I would absolutely do that. At number 6, DK Metcalf is coming off a poor performance in week 5, 7.5 fantasy points. He struggled against a really good corner for the Giants in Deonte Banks. But this is a great, very quick buy low opportunity because he's probably going to go off tonight against the 49ers. And then that window is going to be slammed in your face. So try to get the talented receiver on your team now, if possible, as DK ranks top 15 in receiving yards and yards after the catch on a new look pass happy offense led by Ryan Grubb, who's an extremely creative play caller. I mean, Geno Smith leads all quarterbacks right now in pass attempts with 199. Seattle likes to throw the football. They're going to continue to throw the football. They do it very well, and DK is going to continue to be a big part of it. He's the wide receiver 17 in fantasy points per game right now, but I think he has a very good chance to finish as a top 12, top 10 fantasy receiver. So I'd be trying to get Metcalf on my team right now before it's too late. At number 5, Travis Etienne has struggled to put up big fantasy numbers all season long. And early on in the year, it was more of an opportunity thing. Like, he wasn't getting carries. He wasn't getting a ton of opportunities on a bad Jacksonville offense. And to this point, he still doesn't have more than 13 carries in any game this season. He hasn't went over 90 total yards in any game this season, but in those first 4 games, he was relatively efficient. He still looked pretty good with opportunities on the ground, through the air. And in week 5, that all changed. Yes, Etienne's shoulder continued to bother him. We know it was bothering him in week 4. It lingered into week 5. But the bigger issue here was Tank Bigsby broke out. He looked absolutely phenomenal. He looked like the better back in this Jacksonville backfield. And that is going to be a huge problem going forward for Travis, because I just don't see a world where this isn't a 50-50 timeshare or kind of slightly leaning to Tank's favor. Like, if Tank is getting more carries in this backfield, it would not shock me at all. If he's on the field more than Etienne, would not be a surprise. And that is just not good for Travis owners. Like, I'd be trying to sell now before Bigsby goes off again and either Etienne is limited due to the shoulder injury, or what if they shut him down, or what if he re-injures it and makes it worse. Like, I'd be getting out of the Etienne business as fast as you can. Tank is just playing phenomenal right now. 1st in rush yards over expectation per attempt, 1st in yards per carry, 3rd in PFF grades, 11 missed tackles forced on Sunday, compared to Etienne, who ranks 27th in yards per carry and 55th in PFF grades. Like, Jacksonville is 1-4 on the year. They're not just going to leave a really good player on the bench for Etienne, who's just been average, right? Like, Bigsby is going to continue to get opportunities. He's going to continue to eat into Etienne's workload. And like I said, if this happens again in week 6, you're not going to be able to trade Travis for much. At number 4, Chase Brown has been on a tear over these last 2 weeks. 27 rush attempts, 126 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, 39.6 combined fantasy points over that stretch. Brown is starting to take over the Cincinnati backfield, and he was already doing that before Zach Moss suffered this ankle injury. But now with Moss potentially out this week and who knows how long, that's going to really open the door for Chase Brown to emerge, for Chase Brown to earn a massive workload. And even once Zach Moss returns, Chase might not give the job back. That is a concern. I think Chase Brown could be the RB1 on Cincinnati for the rest of the year. I mean, Chase has always been the more efficient, explosive, electric back. Chase Brown is a really good pass catcher out of the backfield as well. He ranks 2nd in the NFL in rushing success rate, 7th in yards after contact per attempt, and is averaging 5.6 yards per rush. Like I said, on a really good Cincinnati offense that's cooking right now. I know they're not winning football games, but Joe Burrow playing the best football of his career. Jamar Chase is going to keep defenses honest because he is playing at an all-time high. Like, you want the RB1 on a good offense that is just really talented. He's a young back that can catch the football too. So in PPR leagues, he has that receiving upside. He's a complete package. I'd even consider buying him high. Just get Chase Brown on your team, especially if you need a running back or you want a guy that could be a league winner the second half of the season. I think that's Chase Brown. I really like him as a player. I really like his situation, and he needs to be on your team. At number 3, Chuba Hubbard has looked like a completely different back with Andy Dalton under center. Who would have thought? What kind of world are we living in? Over the last 3 weeks, Hubbard is tied for the RB2 in fantasy with Kyren Williams. That's how good Hubbard's been. He's been scorching hot, averaging 22.5 fantasy points per game over that stretch. The concern here, though, is who is waiting in the wings. Jonathan Brooks, the stud rookie running back. Yes, he's coming off a torn ACL, but the Panthers traded up to get Brooks on their team. When he's ready, once he's activated, he's going to be used. Like, the Panthers probably not going to win many football games this year. They want to see what they have in this young, explosive, 3-down skill set rookie. He's going to be involved. So this could be a messy, 3-headed backfield. Probably won't see much Miles Sanders. It'll probably be Chuba and Jonathan Brooks in the backfield, but that's not good for Hubbard because he's dominating all the carries right now. That just won't be the case when Brooks returns. So if you can sell Hubbard for a high-end RB2 price tag to a desperate manager in your league who needs a running back, then I would take advantage of that right now. At number 2, Breece Hall. I feel for everyone who has Breece Hall on their team. I have a lot of Hall on a lot of my fantasy rosters, and over the last 2 weeks, it has been brutal. 10.5 combined fantasy points. To be fair, let's look at this from an angle of optimism. Glass half full. The last 2 teams that Breece has played, Denver, Minnesota, both have really good defenses. And don't forget, yes, Hall has struggled these last 2 games, but through the first 3 weeks, he was the RB5 in fantasy, averaging 20 fantasy points per game. And he's still seeing elite usage, even with Braylon Allen on the roster. 70% of the snaps, 63% of the rush attempts, 60% routes run. If you're a Breece owner, here's what you're hoping for with head coach Robert Saleh. We know, fired. Interim head coach Jeff Ulbrich gets promoted. We want Nathaniel Hackett fired or demoted next. The play calling duties should be moved over to Todd Downing, who in my opinion is more qualified for that position. He's currently the Jets' pass game coordinator and quarterback coach. The Jets have one of the worst offenses in football with all the talent that they have. Rodgers, Wilson, Mike Williams, Braylon Allen, Breece Hall. And a lot of that can be blamed on Hackett because he has this boring, stale offense that doesn't have many motions, doesn't have much play action. It's very predictable. Even Garrett Wilson a couple weeks ago kind of hinted at that in an interview. We need this offense to change because clearly it's an issue. They don't know how to run the football, and they're even struggling to throw the football. So I believe that Hall is going to turn this around because of the hopefully improved situation. Hopefully Nathaniel Hackett loses the play calling duties. If those things happen, there are going to be better days for Breece, who is a very favorable running back schedule the rest of the way. He's a really talented running back. And he got hot the second half of last year as well. I know that was partially due to coming off a torn ACL, but there's still plenty of time for the really talented running back to turn it around. So if you're a Breece owner, I would not be panicking yet, even though the last 2 weeks have been really discouraging. And if Hall is not on your roster, I would be trying to buy low now on Breece before it's too late. At number 1, Kenneth Walker. Outside of suffering that oblique injury that kept him out a couple of games, Walker is looking like one of the best running backs in football on one of the best offenses in football. 33.6 fantasy points in week 4 and 14.6 fantasy points in week 5 on only 5 carries. So if the Walker owner in your league is freaking out, he only got 5 carries, like what the heck, then buy him now, because that is actually a good thing. Last year, if Seattle was trailing and they had to throw a lot, which was the case against the Giants, Walker, where would he be? He'd be on the bench, he'd be eating popcorn, he wouldn't be on the football field. But that wasn't the case this year. Those 14.6 fantasy points last week came from what he did in the passing game, which is absolutely phenomenal. Walker saw 8 targets and he reeled in 7 of those for 57 yards. Like, that was the one knock on Walker as a fantasy running back last year. Coming into this year, he's not involved in the passing game. He's not going to get receptions, so that's going to cap his upside. But if you were tuned in, if you were subscribed, if you were watching this channel, we talked about how we were pretty confident with reading through everything that we saw in the offseason, everything that Ryan Grubb came out and said. We felt pretty confident that Kenneth was going to be the workhorse back for Seattle this year, as this coaching staff didn't have many ties to Zach Charbonnet. They didn't draft Charbonnet. So that's what we thought was going to happen. And look at, sure enough, that is what is happening. Walker's looking like a top 5 fantasy back the rest of the season. And if you can somehow get him on your team after an off game, like if the Walker manager doesn't know what's going on, they're not really reading into things, and you can get him on your team for cheap, that would be one of the biggest steals that you could make for your fantasy team. Because like I said, I think Walker is probably going to be a top 5, top 8 fantasy back because of his pass game usage, because of his explosiveness, because of the team that he's on, because of the talent that he has. Like, I want Walker on my team. Get him on your roster, trade for him now, do whatever it takes. On to some quick honorable mentions. I'd be trading for all Dolphins players, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devon Etienne, as it looks like Tua is set to return week 8. It's not a for sure thing yet, but everything that I'm seeing looks like that's likely what is going to happen. I'd also be trading for all Rams players, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. As both guys are injured, you can probably maybe buy them at a discount now. Take advantage of that. And then on to these 4 guys who I think you can acquire for very cheap right now that have league-winning upside. They could be absolute superstars the second half of the year. Ladd McConkey, Jalen Warren, who is clearly the best running back on Pittsburgh. Najee Harris looks terrible. Cordell Patterson's old and injured. I really like Blake Corum as the elite stash in all of fantasy at the running back position, as he looked really good, explosive in his limited opportunities in week 5. And if Kyron were to get hurt, Blake Corum would be a top 10 back the rest of the way. And Dontavian Wicks, I know a lot of people have a bad taste in their mouth after they spent all that fab on Wicks and then he didn't do much in week 5, but I would be patient. I think Dontavian is a really good player on a really good team attached to Jordan Love. So if you can get any of those 4 guys on your team for very cheap, then please do that now, because I love their upside the rest of the year. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. If you took away anything from the video, if you could please subscribe to the channel, like the video, I'd really appreciate it. It helps me out more than you know, and I will see you in the next one.